Good morning, everyone.
Hey, you got me? Loud.
Good morning. Ben David, District Attorney for New Hanover and Pender Counties. I am here today to talk about the in-custody death of former Sheriff Ronald Hewett, who died on July 12, 2014, while in the custody of the New Hanover County Detention Facility. I want to stress that the things I'm going to talk about today and the procedures I've put in place are consistent throughout the decade now that I've been the district attorney. While facts and circumstances will change, the procedures we put in place do not. I know that at the core of maintaining public trust is a vigorous pursuit of the truth and also transparency. And we try to do that in all of these types of cases and are doing that again here today. I'm going to be calling on 3 different people to speak during the course of this, and at the conclusion of all of our remarks, we'll be happy to try and answer any of your questions. I'm going to be calling on Tom Old, one of my senior prosecutors in the office, who, as you've seen from past press conferences, heads up our use of force team when we have an incident either in custody like this or an officer-related shooting. Tom frequently works with me and others within my office and the State Bureau of Investigation to ensure that an outside and competent review of the evidence is conducted and that the legal research that we need to bring to bear on these cases is done. He will be detailing for you in a summary what our investigation has showed over these last approximately 3 weeks. Scott Parker, who is the U.S. Marshal for the Eastern District of North Carolina, will also briefly address you. As you have reported in the past, Ronald Hewett was in the custody of the New Hanover County Detention Facility, but he was not here on state charges. Rather, he was here on federal charges. And this is the holding facility for the region for federal prisoners. And finally, Sheriff Ed McMahon will speak to you. I know that he's already had some remarks before today about this, and he was going to detail further what his internal investigation has shown, and also show it to you and not just say it. I also want to stress that this is a case where, while it has had heightened media scrutiny, I am mindful of the fact that in any case where I meet with a decedent's family, and I did in this case, that we're not just talking about a criminal investigation, we're talking about someone's father, someone's son, someone's baby. I want to be as respectful as I can to this process and to them, while at the same time needing to be as fully forthcoming with the facts as we can to ensure the community that my decision is fully supported by both the facts and the law. To be very clear, on July 12th of this year, the only person who committed any crime was Ronald Hewett. No officer will be charged either for the use of force or for the medical treatment that was provided that night. Now, in arriving at that decision, we were notified within 1 hour of the death of Ronald Hewett. Members of my office responded to the scene. Together with Sheriff Ed McMahon, we dispatched the Coastal Division of the State Bureau of Investigation, who immediately assumed operational control of this investigation. There was, of course, a parallel independent investigation going on internally by the New Hanover Sheriff's Office, and you have heard about some of that already. But it's taken us now about 3 weeks to pour through all the witness interviews, and every officer was interviewed. We poured through the medical history and testimonies of not only the treating people at the scene, but of the medical examiner, and I'm going to be releasing a preliminary report of Dr. Oliver today, who conducted the autopsy. We have also interviewed all the inmates. Now, to be clear, Sheriff Hewett was in administrative segregation and was not in the presence of other inmates in the sense that they couldn't physically stand next to him. But as you will see, he is in a pod that has access to single facility cells where people can look out and see and hear what was going on. Just as we do knock and talks after an investigation, all those prisoners were pulled from their cells and interviewed to further corroborate what I'm going to be saying today. We also had the benefit of seeing this entire incident from start to finish, because literally from the moment this initial encounter occurred to the many minutes after Mr. Hewett had already died and heroic efforts were made to resuscitate him, the entire incident is caught on videotape. Now, my job, again, as district attorney is to determine whether the criminal laws were violated in any respect. In that regard, 2 aspects of the law are at issue, one involving the use of force and the other involving the care of a person while they're in custody. Now, with respect to the use of force, a deputy deployed a taser not once but twice, and then other deputies forcibly restrained Mr. Hewett in an effort to subdue him after he acted in an aggressive manner towards them. Several courts have upheld this use of force, intermediate use of force, under facts very similar to the ones at issue here. I have cited some of those cases in a letter that I'm going to be distributing in your press packet later today. Additionally, the statutes in North Carolina carefully spell out the treatment that everyone is due when they are in the custody of law enforcement, specifically in a detention facility. Those statutes can be found in 153A-224 and statutes following. They basically require local confinement facilities to provide for the care and treatment of prisoners, including emergency medical care if such an event arises. These same statutes list the procedures for intaking prisoners with medical needs and the reporting requirements following a death in custody. Failure to comply with these provisions can result in misdemeanor charges. A review of all the evidence, including medical records, videotape evidence, and investigative reports, leaves no doubt that the New Hanover County Sheriff and his staff complied with the criminal laws in providing for the medical care of Mr. Hewett before, during, and after this incident. The same laws with respect to use of force leave me with no doubt that the deputy who deployed the taser and those who provided immediate backup acted consistent with well-established precedent to protect themselves and others in the lawful performance of their duties. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to call again on Tom Old at this time, who is going to read to you a detailed summary of what we found during the course of this investigation. I will then come up and read portions of the preliminary report of Dr. Bill Oliver before turning the microphone over to some of the others. Thank you.
Ronald Hewett was booked into the New Hanover County Detention Center as a prisoner of the United States government on July the 10th of 2014 at approximately 11 o'clock a.m. He was assigned to a housing unit as a high-risk inmate due to his status as a former sheriff of Brunswick County. He was placed in a single cell and segregated from other inmates for his own safety. He began to refuse to eat meals on Friday, July the 11th, and refused to be seen by mental health professionals on Saturday, July the 12th. He had an initial supervised visit with his mother and a female friend at the time of his booking, and another on Friday, July the 11th. A third visit was scheduled with his mother and a female friend for 2 o'clock p.m. on Saturday, July the 12th. He was released from his cell into the open pod area, the day room, after he indicated to deputies that he was ready for his visit. When the cell door opened, he was wearing nothing but his boxer shorts. Deputies asked Mr. Hewett over the intercom to return to his cell and put on appropriate clothing for his visitation. Hewett ignored the deputy's request and walked around the open pod area looking at other inmates' cells. Inmates were becoming loud vocally and banging on their cell doors. The deputy entered the pod area to address the situation with Hewett. As the deputy approached Hewett, Hewett assumed a fighting stance and attempted to strike the deputy with a closed fist. The deputy was able to avoid being struck, removed his taser, and began giving commands and taser warnings to Hewett as he continued to circle away from him. Hewett disregarded these commands and attempted to strike him. When Hewett continued to attempt to strike the deputy deployed his taser, striking Hewett in the chest area with taser probes. Hewett dropped down, rolled in an attempt to remove the probes. He came back to his feet and again attempted to strike the deputy. He continued pursuing the deputy who evaded Hewett. The deputy attempted to use his taser to stun Hewett on the arms without effect, as Hewett punched at the deputy, but the taser appeared to have little effect on Hewett. Additional officers arrived in the pod area to assist the deputy. They were yelling, "Get down, get down." A second deputy approached Hewett and began to give commands to Hewett. Hewett did not comply with those commands and came toward the second deputy in an aggressive manner. The second deputy struck Hewett with a glancing blow with a closed fist to defend himself. Although that blow stunned Hewett, he again attempted to assault the second deputy. Meanwhile, the first deputy reloaded his taser with a second cartridge and deployed his taser. One probe struck Hewett in the center of his chest, and the second probe hit his right hand. The taser was effective in dropping Hewett to the ground, where officers were able to safely control Hewett using standard procedures that did not include any chokehold or undue pressure on Hewett's chest area. A review of the fixed camera footage of the activity in the open pod area provides the following timeline intervals of the initial encounter with Hewett by the first deputy and others. At the beginning, Hewett comes into view in an open area just after he exited his cell. He was wearing boxer shorts. He walked around the area. At 47 seconds, Hewett and the first deputy meet in front of the stairs. They come within an arm's length of one another. Hewett takes a step back and assumes a fighting stance and appears to throw a blow at the deputy's head. At 52 seconds, the deputy backs out of camera view and a red dot from his taser appears in Hewett's chest area. Hewett, at 1 minute and 1 second, goes out of camera view. At 1 minute and 11 seconds, both Hewett and the deputy come back into camera view, and Hewett is advancing on the deputy as the deputy is backing away from Hewett. The deputy is holding his taser in front of him for defensive purposes. Hewett throws a series of punches at the deputy, and the deputy deflects them with his free hand. Both Hewett and the deputy go out of view at 1 minute and 18 seconds, with Hewett actively pursuing the deputy and assaulting the deputy. At 1 minute and 25 seconds, both Hewett and the deputy come back into camera view, with Hewett still advancing and the deputy still backing up. Hewett continues to throw punches as the deputy continues to deflect them while attempting drive stuns. A taser is still active after probes are deployed, and he was using the taser to try and drive stun Mr. Hewett. Hewett looked over his shoulder as other deputies began to enter the area. Hewett and the first deputy go around the stairs, and the second deputy can be seen coming into view, pointing at Hewett. Hewett advances on the second deputy, and they exchange blows, but it is unclear from the video whether any of those blows strike the other. Hewett appears to stumble backwards as the other deputies come into view. At 1 minute and 49 seconds, 4 deputies converge on Hewett, who is still in a fighting stance, while the red laser dot can be seen on Hewett's chest. At 1 minute and 52, Hewett throws a punch with a closed fist at one of the deputies, and he appears to react to being tased a second time by reaching up to his chest with his left hand and turning his upper torso to his right side, away from the deputy with the taser, who can be seen pointing his taser at Hewett. Hewett then falls to the ground, first to his left knee, then to his buttocks, and finally to his back, while still holding the area of the probe strike from the taser in the area of his chest. At 1 minute and 57 seconds, 7 deputies come into view. One deputy approaches Hewett, who is still on his back, and rolls Hewett onto his stomach. Other deputies converge, and the deputies are seen subduing Hewett by holding him down. No punches or blows are seen coming from any deputy. At 2 minutes and 6 seconds, another deputy appears on the scene with an agency-issued handheld camera, and at this point, the handheld video begins. The handheld video shows the following. Deputies began the process of controlling Hewett, who continues to lie on his stomach. One deputy holds his legs with one crossed over the other, and others restrain his arms in order to cuff him for return to his cell. This takes about 3 minutes to complete that process. As the deputies attempted to lift Hewett to his feet, he holds his legs up behind him at a 90-degree angle. As a result, deputies are forced to pick him up by his arms and legs and carry him face down back to his cell, where he's placed face down on his sleeping mat. An on-duty nurse arrives to render care to Hewett. She has the taser probes removed and treats the resulting wounds. The nurse suggests that she will check on Hewett's vitals once he calms down and the situation is under control. Her statement said she could not complete the exam at that time due to his aggression. During the time when the deputies are dealing with Hewett in his cell, he's heard to say to them, "You know, it takes a real talent to kill a man with a taser. You all don't have the bleeps to step up to a man." While he kicked his legs and yelled to inmates, "I didn't go down like a coward, boys, and you all got to fight." During the next approximately 15 minutes that elapsed after Hewett was returned to his cell from the open pod area, he continued to refuse to cooperate with deputies, requiring him to continue to maintain control over his arms and legs. Ultimately, it was determined to put him on suicide watch. That required that everything be removed from his cell except his sleeping mat, and that his boxer shorts be removed as well. The factors that entered into that decision were his earlier behavior, the fact that he maintained that he was fine when medical personnel examined him earlier due to his odd behavior in his cell, his attack on 2 deputies, and refusal to cooperate with deputies when they returned him to his cell. Hewett showed no signs of difficulty breathing or any other signs of distress while deputies were stabilizing him in his cell. Hewett was locked in the cell with orders that his cell be checked every 5 minutes. Electronic records of the deputies' key fobs were activated in the cell, show that deputies checked Hewett's cell 5 minutes after he was locked down, then 2 minutes later, and once more 3 minutes after that. The fob records the time that the fobs are carried by the deputies adjacent to a particular cell area. During the second check, a deputy was concerned that Hewett was not moving and reported that fact. The shift supervisor decided that it would be necessary to re-enter the cell for a welfare check, but it should be done with several deputies in case Hewett was playing possum, as some inmates do. Deputies re-entered the cell, and a deputy observed that, quote, "his face looks blue." At that time, medical was immediately called, and a nurse re-entered less than a minute later. It was determined that life-saving measures should be taken. EMS was called, and the nurse and deputies began CPR. No shockable rhythm was evident on the automatic external defibrillator that was placed on Hewett. EMS and County Fire arrived approximately 14 minutes after the cell was re-entered. CPR efforts continued with personnel switching off for nearly 30 minutes before it was determined that those efforts should be suspended. The entire time from Hewett's entry into the open pod area until CPR efforts were discontinued were recorded on a fixed camera or when handheld video began as described above. No deputy, inmate, or other personnel could have had physical contact with Hewett other than that which is recorded on camera. The preliminary autopsy findings of Dr. William Oliver will be provided to you. Those findings are consistent with the statements taken, eyewitness accounts, and the video observed by the Office of the District Attorney and by Dr. Oliver.
The facts and circumstances of every case will dictate the speed with which we're able to stand before the community or go before a grand jury to present a case to either the community or to the courts. In this case, we're obviously at about the 3-week mark, and one of the things that has been outstanding that has not been able us to speak with more certainty is obviously the medical exam conducted by Bill Oliver. As many of you know in the press who have worked with cases like this in the past, these examinations, while they happen immediately, sometimes takes weeks and weeks to ultimately get the results back from. I didn't want to wait that long in light of everything that has already been said about this case and about my certainty with respect to what I could see in the course of that investigation. And so what I did is I reached out to Bill Oliver, the doctor who performed the medical examination, the autopsy. Let me just say as an outset that Dr. Oliver is a credit to the profession. I first met him years ago, not as a medical examiner, but an expert witness that we used in the Delgado trial. He at the time was working in Georgia. He has since relocated to North Carolina and happened to be the medical examiner who worked in this case. I talked to him when he performed that autopsy on July 14th, and I talked to him again on July 25th after I had SBI agents take the videotape that Tom has just described so that he could watch the whole tape himself. While his report is still weeks away because some of it requires toxicology and clearance through Chapel Hill's central office, he was nice enough to write a letter to me dated July 25th that I'm going to be making part of the press packet. I want to stress the thing that he says about this report, which is that it is preliminary, provisional, and incomplete. Having said that, he says a few things that I think are very important for us to talk about in the context of whether any criminal charges are appropriate. He lists the cause of death as a heart condition called dilated cardiomyopathy, with the contributing factors of stress of subdual and chronic alcohol use. Now, with regard to the manner of death, and I'm going to quote this paragraph from the letter, this case will almost certainly be classified as, quote, homicide. It should be noted that this is a medico-legal term and not a legal determination or an indication of a crime. Medical examiners are limited in their manner determination to 5 categories: homicide, suicide, accident, natural, or undetermined. The classification of homicide is appropriate here because the volitional act of another contributed to the stress effect that in turn contributed to death. This does not imply the intent to kill or cause harm, but in this case, the intent to subdue. The action was volitional in the sense that the attempt to subdue was performed voluntarily. Now, with respect to cause of death, I wanted him to flesh that out and specifically look at 3 different aspects. One was positional asphyxiation. Another was whether the taser could have caused any of this. And finally, something called excited delirium. In this respect, I'm going to again quote from Dr. Oliver's letter to me. It might be useful to review some of the other possibilities in the differential diagnosis. 3 issues that frequently arise in this context are so-called positional asphyxia, the possibility of a taser-related death, and excited delirium. Positional asphyxia encompasses 2 concepts. The first is a positional component associated with so-called hog tying, in which the actual position of the body inhibits breathing. This theory of death has largely been debunked with respect to people without a medical history of significant respiratory disease, to the point that the author of the original paper proposing it has since retracted his hypothesis. The second component is that of weight being placed on the chest or back, inhibiting chest movement. Recent experiments have shown again that in people without severe respiratory comorbidity, this is not a reasonable mechanism of death unless there is an extraordinary amount of weight placed on the chest. More important, a review of the video shows that while the decedent had his hands held behind his back and his